one of the books that I published, and the first one, and the bestseller, by the way, was called The House of Hughes and Dunahoe and Their Many Relatives. And in this book, I have a story of the Stonewall Jackson Hughes, when it happened, about the fire that came down the road from the church and rolled up into his house. And I have a lot of other stories in this, and I also have a lot of family research in Volume 1. The Carmichaels, the Cribbs, Davises, Edwards, Hazeltons, Huggins, Larimer, Lewis, Marsh, Perry, McDaniels, Powells, Stones, Altmans, Thompson, and many other families. It was so large. When the publisher is Tennessee Valley Publishing Company, but they don't sell the books I do. And when I carried the book to them, when they started going through and seeing what they were going to use and what they were going to put first and all that stuff that goes along with that, he said he's going to have to divide it and have Volume 1 and Volume 2, and I didn't understand that. I said, no, I want it all in one because it's all history of Hemingway and Johnsonville and Georgetown and Florence, those families. And he said, my dear, we couldn't pick the book up if we put it all in there. He said, you're going to have to put it in 2 volumes. So I did a Volume 1 and a Volume 2 and was able to add some more families in Volume 2. The books that I like so much is that when I wrote about Johnsonville, South Carolina, and Hemingway, South Carolina, because I got to research and find out what really was going on and how these towns were started and the spirit of the people that started these towns. And Hemingway was started with a group of Lamberts that had a land that they began to sell. And then the land was bought by the Hemingways along with a store that was in Lambert then. And so that was interesting to me because somewhere along the line my family tied into that. And then when I began to write about Johnsonville, who was named after Captain Johnson from Johnsonville, I began to research, and I couldn't find what I wanted. And one day I went to the town hall here in Johnsonville and asked them if they had any old papers that I could go through. And she said, sure you can. Just go, this box is back there. And when I got those papers out, it even listed the people that voted the first time. It listed all the first officials. Now, you think I didn't have a good time? I didn't eat lunch. I stayed there till they closed and, of course, was back there the next morning. They were very generous helping me get the material together. So I've enjoyed my Johnsonville Hemingway book very much. And then I've written about some people that were inspired me. The Newell family that came here from Massachusetts. And there were 2 branches, 2 brothers. And they came south, and he was a circuit rider for the Methodist Church South. And he had his business and his office in Massachusetts. And when he came to the Low Country, and what I liked about him so much was the spirit he and his wife had. There was a river, Mingo and Black River, and it didn't have any transportation across the river. So you couldn't go across the river unless you had a boat. Well, he and his wife got there at sundown, and they wanted to go to Georgetown and preach the next day. So he unhooked the wagon, and he took part of the mules and horses and the wagons and swam across the river, got on the other side, built a fire to dry his clothes and all. And he looked, and his wife started across, swimming with the rest of the horses, and the horses got away from her. And he said while he looked that she swam down the river, caught the horses, and pulled them back up and landed on the other side. Now, you can't beat people like that are so determined to do whatever their mission is, and their mission was carrying the Word of God. So it's people like that have interested me so much in the past. And I just began to write it down, and then I found one of my books, volume 1 as a matter of fact, the National Archives bought it. And I think it's in Washington that book was. And a Newell man happened to go in and see the book, and his mother was a Newell and his father was a Laramie, and they lived at Muddy Creek. And their farm joined our farm. So he said, I knew you. So he called and told me, he said, I found a Newell book that it's got some information in it. I said, well, send it to me. So he did. And when he sent me the book, I realized where they came from and how powerful that family was. But the interesting thing was that the brother that broke off went to Maine, and he became interested in the witchcraft and the killing of people who were supposed to have that type of spirit. And so I looked at the two brothers and tried to figure out what made one go one way and what made one go another way. And so if anybody has the answer to that, I'd certainly like to have it. But that family fascinated me. My husband's family, which were Dunahoes, fascinated me too, because I had a hard time finding them, and I had to go to Pennsylvania to start looking for a river where the family came in there and how they got to Hemingway and Johnsonville area, and found that coming down the river, I kept finding some Dunahoe families that had stayed in certain places. And they went into first North Carolina, then crossed to Tennessee, and the history was so exciting because a Dunahoe man married a woman that was a bear hunter, and so he became a bear hunter. And so they went all over that part of the country, killing bears and selling the hide. And he took his family, and his name was Ashabel Dunahoe, and he got his family, was going to Tennessee, to a Palestine, Tennessee, because there apparently was some relatives already there. So they were going to follow them and go, well, they came to Johnsonville, but they settled there, and for 3 generations. And then they decided they was going on to Palestine, so they took the wagon, and what I had done in the meantime, I contacted the National Society of Historians in Palestine, Texas, and they wrote me back and told me of a woman there that was a Dunahoe, so I contacted her, and she and her husband came. My husband and I, Bill Dunahoe, and the Prothos followed the Dunahoe Trail all the way. We left, the place is between the towns of Hemingway and Johnsonville, where they settled, and we followed from there all the way to, they stopped their first day, they went 18 miles, and they stopped at a Hannah farm, and they wrote a note, and I got a hold of that note, that they slept on a sassafras bed, and that later I found out that they were relatives of some sort. And then they were able to, I followed them all the way. They got to Waycross, Georgia. When they got to Waycross, what happened is that one of the wagons broke down, so George Washington Dunahoe come back to Johnsonville and had 4 children, and my husband was one of those descendants. So that's how the Dunahoes got into Johnsonville.